Hi, I'm Jo and welcome back to a new tutorial today where I'm going to show you how to make these beautiful, quite delicate little bracelets actually. The predominant bead that you can see through the middle there is called a StormDuo, so it's a double drilled bead. And I've called these bracelets rolling waves because if you look at those StormDuos, I think they look like the waves rolling across the ocean. So they bead up really quickly. It would be nice to make a few in a different colorways and then you could wear them as stacker bracelets because they are really slim as well. So let's get started. Before we get going with the technique, let's have a look at the beads we're going to be using. So I've got some size 11 seed beads here and some size 8 seed beads. So those are just your regular Miyuki 11s and 8s. Then these silver ones here, these are the StormDuos. And you can see where I've turned them on their different sides. So here you've got that very slight little S shape and you can see the two holes through the side there. Now a little tip, when you are working with multi-holed beads, check them all before you start creating. Every now and then the coatings that the manufacturers use on the beads can clog these holes. And there's nothing more frustrating than getting halfway through a design and not being able to use one of those holes. And then right over here on the left we have got the 4mm Miyuki Magatamas. So they have a hole one end, and then if I turn it on its side you can see its slight drop to the other side. And if I show you here, so StormDuos are very evident as the rolling waves. Then we've got the Miyuki Magatamas, which are these big ones either side, and then the 11s and 8s are just filling in the gaps along the way. Of course you'll need a clasp unless you're going to bead one yourself, a beading needle, I always use a size 10, and then your thread of choice. I tend to use Fireline. If you've watched my other videos you'll know by now I'm a Fireline addict. I use the 6 pound in most of my bead weaving with a size 10 beading needle. You'll see here I've got 3 of the StormDuos set out because we're going to start at the end here where we've got 3, and it's really important the way in which you pick them up so that you get that continuous flow of the rolling waves. So it's an idea to lay them out on your bead mat just as I have done before you pick them up, just so that you know you're picking them up in the right order, and you can see the curve moving and how they snuggle in to each other. So where there's a bend, the other one curves the other way to snuggle in as closely as possible. Right, we're going to get going now, but before we start I just want to look at these 3 set up again. So you'll see the bottom row of the StormDuo is the same direction as the top row. And it's that middle row that you'll need to pick up differently so that they all connect together, because bumps on one side of the StormDuos need to fit in the curves on the side of the other one. So we're going to thread on a wingspan of your thread. So wingspan, if you stretch your arms out to the sides and you go from the fingertip to fingertip of your middle fingers from the left to the right, you'll have a wingspan of thread, which will be enough for the project. Take your stopper bead down towards the end of your thread and leave a 20cm tail because you'll use that tail to add on one end of your clasp, and pass the needle back through the bead. Right, the starting point is the tricky point because you want to pick up your StormDuos just as they are there. So I'm going to just take 3 from here. I'm leaving those there so that I can keep an eye on them and see the directions that I need to pick them up in. So I'm going to flip this one over onto its side, and I can see that that now faces the same way as the StormDuo on the bottom, on the base there. So I'm going to pop that onto my needle. The middle one is that direction, and I'm going through the hole on the right of it because there's the hole on the left out to the side. And now I'm looking at the top one and I'm going to flip it over, and there I can see that's the shape I'm after. So I'm going through the hole on the left. Whoops. Let's just flip it back, make sure I've got it right. through the hole on the left, and I'm going to let those all drop down to my stopper bead. And they look pretty similar that way, but remember the middle one is actually going to be that way, and you can now see how they sort of tessellate together and fit snugly there. So along the top, to join them all together, we're going to be using our Miyuki 11 O's and 8 O's, and we're going to pick up 111, 18, 111, and we're going to pass the needle through the empty hole on the right of that StormDuo along the top row. Now we need a StormDuo in the middle, and I don't really need those there now because I just need to look to the one before. So all the StormDuos that are in the top row are going to be facing the same direction, middle row all the same, and the bottom row all the same direction. So I need to make sure now that I'm going to be picking up this next StormDuo in the right direction. So let's pop one out on the mat. Make sure that it looks exactly the same as the one before, and I'm going to come down through that hole and connect it to the StormDuo along the bottom row. And when I pull it in tightly, you can see how they're fitting snugly together now. And that StormDuo in the middle is going in exactly the same direction as the StormDuo on the right. Now to connect the row of StormDuos along the bottom edge, we're going to use our Magatamas. So pick up one Magatama, and I need another StormDuo, and this time I am placing it on my mat so that it looks like the StormDuo along the bottom row. And I'm going to come up through the hole on the left, and I'm going to join it to the middle row through that empty hole. Pull your thread through tightly. If I pop that down on the bead mat, you can see how it's now beginning. So now I'm looking to add a StormDuo onto the top row. Remember, these will only be pulled into line once you've connected both holes either side. So the top row, I need my StormDuo to resemble the same direction as the one before. So I'm going to just flip it round until it looks like the one before. There we go. And I'm going to pass my needle through that hole on the left. And to connect up along the top, let's just pop that down there so that it fits in the curve. I'm going to pick up an 11, an 8 and an 11 and pass back through the empty hole. Now we need one in the middle, so we don't need those anymore because we're now judging it on the StormDuos that have passed before. So you see how important it is to get the direction of those first three correct. So the middle one, I've picked it up, I've popped it on the mat correctly. From the top row, connecting the top row to the bottom row, and pull your thread through. Connection point along the bottom, we're using a Magatama, and then I need another StormDuo, and I'm going to make sure that I've got it facing the correct way. Here we go, and I'm coming up through the middle section, through the middle StormDuo. You can see how quickly this will bead up. It is a bit fiddly just trying to get those StormDuos in the right position. Right, we're on the top row now, so I'm looking to the previous StormDuos on the top row, and I'm just going to flip that one over so that it's the same direction. Pop my needle through, and I can at the same time pick up my 11, my 8, my 11. Let them all drop down. Flip the StormDuo around so that you can pass through the empty hole. And if it's a little loose, just take those 11s and pull your thread through so that they're fitting snugly. Right, we need a middle one now. And you'll get quicker at working out the direction that these have got to go in. just by using your eye and checking it out. But lay it out on the mat because that way you can see it a bit more clearly. We're going to pick up a Magatama and another StormDuo. Just make sure I've got it the right way. I'm following the bottom row. And come up through the empty hole in the middle. And we've got one to add on the top. And I can see that that's the correct way. And I'm going to pick up my 11, my 8 and my 11 at the same time. Let them drop down. Come through that empty hole. And we need one in the middle, in the center. And let's just make sure we've got it the correct way. We're following the pattern of the central ones. So down through that one and connect up the bottom. Now you would do this the whole way along for a length that you require for your bracelet, but just you'll know when to stop. One, when the length is correct, but just as we've got a StormDuo that sticks out this end, we need one sticking out on that end too. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to bead the other way. I'm going to pretend that I've beaded the full length that I need, and I'm going to come backwards filling in these gaps. So along this bottom edge we need our 11s and 8s, and along the top edge we need our Magatamas. So coming back this way, I'm going to pick up an 11, an 8 and an 11. And my thread is exiting from the right of the StormDuo along the bottom row, and I'm going to take my needle up through the hole on the left, through the hole of the middle StormDuo and up through the hole of the StormDuo on the top. So you're passing through 3 beads each time now, through 3 StormDuos, reinforcing them and pulling them together. So you can see I've got my 11s and 8s matching top and bottom now. Now to get across to the next lot of 3, I need to pick up one of my Magatamas. And just as I went through 3 before, I'm coming down through 3 of my StormDuos, so through the top, and turn your work around so that it's easier for you to get the needle through the middle and through the base. Now you can see I've got a Magatama top and bottom. So to fill in this gap at the bottom again, it's an 11, an 8 and an 11, and I'm going to pass the needle up through all 3 StormDuos. I need a Magatama to come across the top, and I'm coming back down through my work through all 3 of the StormDuos. You may have to wriggle a little bit to make sure that you're going through all 3 of your beads, but you will get there with a bit of a wriggle. And across the bottom again, an 11, an 8 and an 11, and beading back up through all 3 of your StormDuos. Coming across the top, we're going to pick up another Magatama and come back down through all 3. And I've got one more little section where I'm filling in with an 11, an 8 and an 11, and I'm just going to move that stopper bead out the way a bit, and I'm coming up through those 3 StormDuos. pop that down on the mat now, you can see how all the gaps have been filled in along the top and bottom edges to complete the bracelet. So you will have done that for a full bracelet length. So here's my full bracelet length, and you can see, just to save a bit of time, I've added on one end of the clasp, and I'm going to show you how I did that on the other side. And you can see, if you look here, I've just used the size 11 seed beads to edge around that very end StormDuo. There's no 11s around this side, and I've added one end of the clasp. So just as I'd shown you with that small section before, here's my working thread. I'm going to move this down the way a bit now. Exiting through the top StormDuo, I've just added the 11, the 8 and the 11 along the bottom edge there. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick up 3 of my 11s, and I'm going to pass the needle through that empty hole of that StormDuo right on the edge. And I'm going to do exactly the same on the other side. I'm picking up 3 11s, and I'm going to come through this StormDuo on this end here. And that's the beginning of edging that end tip of my bracelet. So I'm going to just pass the needle through the next 2 here, and then what you can do is you can actually end this thread off. You won't be using this thread anymore because you've got your tail thread that you left before for adding on this side of the clasp. So you can just end that off with a surgeon's knot and thread through a few beads and get it out the way. So I'm now going to swap over to the other side. This was my tail thread that I left, and I'm going to pass the needle up through those 3 that I have just added on the end there. So if we come back to this edge here, what we've added is the 1, 2, 3 on either edge, and then you can see we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 going up to our clasp. So I'm going to pick up, I'll just move that out the way, 5 of my 11s, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm going to let them drop down to the edge there. You can see how they're going to form that pointed edge. Take it through the end of your clasp and back through 2 of your 11s that you'd already added. And when you pull that all through, you'll see how that edge of your clasp sits very neatly on the end there. Now I've come back through 2, so to make the 2 sides equal, I'm just going to pick up 3, and I'm coming back down through those 3, and you can see how that makes a very neat ending to the bracelet. And again, you're going to thread through your StormDuos, taking your thread away from the ends. If you wanted to, you could go back through that V there just to reinforce it, because your clasp takes the most amount of strain. And then again, you're going to use something like a surgeon's knot to tie off your ends so that they are secure, and then thread through some of the beads. Just to show you the finished completed bracelet, I have ended off both my threads on either side. I just used a couple of surgeon's knot and threaded through a few more of the beads to pull that knot into the beads. And my bracelets are complete, and I absolutely love them. For me, it was a far more delicate and simple make to some of the things that I have been doing more recently. So have a go. If you have any questions, please pop them in the comments below, and I promise to answer them. Bye bye for now.